Hey folks, my name is Sasha Iatsenia, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the story of how I made my first data-driven decision. But before I do that, I'd like to share with you a frustration. Have you ever called Comcast or your phone company and waited on the line for 45 minutes? Or maybe you ordered food from DoorDash and they said it's going to come there in 35 minutes, but it took 1 hour, 35 minutes to get there. Have you ever been in those kind of situations? Well, they're really frustrating. And I actually worked for a company that caused all sorts of frustrations that we didn't even realize. And the problem was that our data wasn't that good. Our data was dirty and we didn't know what we were doing. But before we go there, I want to share with you a little bit about myself. My name is Sasha Iatsenia. I'm a product manager at Google. Disclaimer, my opinions are my own and do not represent those of my employer. Prior to working for Google, I was actually building delivery robots. Together with my team, we took Kiwibot from a concept sketch to a mass-produced robot in about 2.5 years. We went from zero to 100,000 orders and expanded to multiple geographies, spanning several countries. The idea was really, really cool. Essentially, you ordered food from an app on your phone, and 30 minutes later, a robot would show up to your doorstep with piping hot food ready for you to savor. We started this concept in Berkeley, and now it's operating all over the States and even abroad. It's an amazing product that helps people get food delivered cheaper and faster than ever before. Never before have we seen robots mesh so seamlessly within the fabric of our sidewalks, helping people to eat, helping people to get things delivered, and making delivery more accessible and affordable for our communities. So, together with my team, we spent a lot of time thinking about all the details, trying out a lot of things, experimenting and breaking things. The reality is that most of the time we did not know what we were doing. There isn't a book that's written about how to build autonomous robots. There is no prior experience of building delivery robots and figuring out how to mesh them seamlessly within the fabrics of our communities. So we wrote the playbook on that. And a lot of that had to do with data. I actually want to share with you the story of how I made my first data driven decision. It all started with my boss coming in and telling me, "Hey, Sasha, we have some customers who are not able to sign up. They put in their phone number into our app, and our app just doesn't send them a confirmation text. They're not able to sign up." And I was like, huh, that's weird. So the first mistake that I made was I just started running directly after this problem. I thought it was something I had to solve, so I started looking into our data. But the challenge was that a lot of our data wasn't quite there, and it was very messy. It was by no means clean, and I had a lot of struggles with that. You see, most of our data was copy and pasted from our CRM and put into Excel sheets. We were able to track our North Star metrics that way. However, we didn't have a lot of clarity about what's happening. And if you wanted to do anything a little bit more complex, you were lost. You didn't have anything you could do. So I started looking through our data. I looked through our logs. Our logs were also quite messy. I looked through all sorts of different data sources, but nothing really stood out. I wasn't able to figure out how often our customers aren't able to sign up, why they're not able to sign up, and all these questions they took me a lot of time to figure out, and I wasn't able to come up with an answer. So after a lot of experimentation and asking some friends about what the rest of the industry does, I actually figured that maybe I should look at customer support queries. So together with my team, we looked at all the customer support queries and we tried to do a bunch of analysis. So the first thing we did was like, okay, why don't we just do a keyword analysis? Why don't we just like download all these customer support queries and run a keyword analysis? Well, we did that, and people talked about food and delivery and robots, but we weren't able to find any discernible patterns. So that didn't quite work out. After a little bit of experimentation, we stumbled upon tagging. So we decided to tag every single one of our conversations so that we can look at them in an aggregate way. What we did is we basically took every single conversation and we added a tag, one of 20 tags to it. After we did that whole process, we looked at the data in aggregate. I downloaded it and I grouped it, I sorted it, and what it turned out was that the phone number problem was nowhere near the top of the list. It was pretty much noise at this point. But our top problem was that customers weren't able to open the door of the robot when the robot arrived to them. I mean, can you imagine this? Like, you've been waiting half an hour, your robot rolls up to you, it's there, your food is piping hot, ready for you to take it, but you can't open the door of the robot. I mean, that must be so frustrating. But we didn't actually realize that until we looked at that data. We were completely blind to that fact. So once we started looking at the data, it was pretty blatant that we had to fix this problem. 1 out of 4 orders, 25% of our orders had this problem. We never realized that. And we probably should have tried deliveries ourselves and followed a robot to see what our customers experienced. But we never did that. Once we realized that 1 out of 4 orders had issues with opening the door, we immediately took action. Together with my team, we redesigned the app to give more feedback and affordances. We reworked the backend and added some more logic to our robot. After a couple of months of hard work, we were able to deploy and ship an updated version of our app, robot, and backend, which completely solved this issue. It went from being the top issue to being so rare that it was essentially noise. We completely solved it. And as a result, we were able to increase the number of orders, decrease the delivery time by 5 minutes, and greatly improve the customer experience. So that's in a nutshell how I made my first data-driven decision. Started off looking the wrong way, got a little lost, tried a lot of things, and actually found a much bigger issue that we need to solve, and then we solved it. So it was a really, really great learning experience, and it showed me the power of having clean data. Now, I want to share with you some of the steps we took after that. So as you remember, I mentioned that our first data platform was Excel. Like, we were copying and pasting things from like our CRM into Excel. And there's a lot of manual copying, pasting, a lot of manual deletion of columns and spaces and weird things. So it was a very laborious process, and it was very hard to analyze or visualize that data as a result. So the very first thing I did was I launched Jupyter on my computer. Since I had experience working with Jupyter before, it was pretty straightforward to get started. I had to learn a lot about connecting to MongoDB, which was our database, and figuring out how to write these queries. But after a while, I got into the groove of it, and I figured out how to run our North Star metrics through Jupyter. This proved to be really, really useful because we got started on experimenting those metrics pretty quickly. The great thing about that is that once we started experimenting with these metrics, we started seeing all sorts of other things we needed to fix and other areas to explore. Now, the challenge with having Jupyter notebooks on my computer was that it was on my computer. It was only accessible to me. And whenever somebody wanted to look at data, they had to ask me to pull that data for them. And of course, it's a question of time, but it's also a question of collaboration. Like, it's hard to collaborate when everything is sitting on one computer. So I said, maybe we should build a data platform. Maybe we should do something that helps my team and the entire company understand that data without having to figure out Jupyter notebooks. So the very first serious platform that we built was a metrics platform built on top of Python and Plotly. We essentially hosted a little microservice on Heroku, and we had our most popular queries, the North Star metric queries, available for the whole company to see. Now, this worked great, except it didn't scale. Once we started hitting hundreds of orders a day, and once we started getting dozens of people on our team, it was really, really hard to scale that. Queries got really slow. If multiple people try to pull data at the same time, it would slow down or crawl. And for days when we had a lot of deliveries, the requests would even time out. We were very inefficient in the way we did our queries, so it was very, very slow. So once we realized the limitations of our initial metrics platform built with Python and Plotly, we started looking for alternatives. And I decided, hey, why not just host a Jupyter notebook server up on Heroku? So I did that. I set up a server, and I started creating notebooks, copied the notebooks I already had on my computer. It kind of worked for a while. The great thing was that now everybody in the company could collaborate on these notebooks. Everybody could access them. They could create things, they could try things, they could experiment with things. And it was a really, really powerful platform. However, we hit some limitations. As we were growing, we reached 100 people in the company. It started getting a little bit tricky for non-technical users to access it. The challenge with Jupyter's server is that once you have notebooks, it's really easy to modify them or delete cells by accident. And that led to a lot of frustrations. People were unable to pull data at the most critical moment, right as they're about to present to investors or about to do a pitch somewhere. They weren't able to pull the data right as they needed it. So after a couple of iterations, we kind of hit a lot of walls with Jupyter, and we decided to try something else. So we ended up on Mode. And Mode is this incredible platform. It's a platform that allows you to do really, really cool things. We actually built a data platform that allowed anybody in the company to pull data, analyze it, and to create their own reports. It was a really, really cool platform, and it allowed us to do a lot of magic. Now, the challenges with Mode is that you need to have a data pipeline that's in place, that's solid, that works. And we didn't quite have that. What we had was a bunch of data that was sitting in MongoDB, that was sitting in Intercom and Mixpanel and God knows where. It was all over the place. And every single one of these places had data in a different format with a different way of accessing it. And it was a little bit messy. So I actually ended up hiring a data engineer to work full time on fixing and building our data pipelines. We pulled all of our data from these different sources, put them into standardized files, and hosted them with Amazon using S3 and Athena. And that way, we were able to run SQL queries from our Mode data platform on just about every data set we had. And this was really, really cool because it allowed us to visualize data at a much larger scale and allowed us to do a lot of magical things. One of them, for example, is this. We tried a lot of different visualizations for our data and tried to figure out how to plot our robots and our Kiwi mates onto a map. And it took us a while to figure out how to visualize that, mostly because our data wasn't clean. Once we cleaned our data, once we figured out how to use it, we were able to import it and then have it visualized on this amazing visualization. The way we did this is we actually pulled our data from our bot logs. We had logs sitting on MongoDB, and also pulled our KiwiMate data, which was similar data that was also sitting on MongoDB. And we essentially plugged them into Kepler. And Kepler is this amazing tool. It's made by Uber, and it's part of a suite of really, really great data visualization tools. There's Kepler, there's Deck, Kepler GL, Deck.gl, and Hubble.gl, all which allow you to do magic with great storytelling and videos and animations that help you tell an amazing story on top of your data. I would say my main takeaway from all of this is that you need to have clean data to understand its nuance. If you have data sitting all over the place, if it's not structured, if it's not ready for you to analyze, then it's just about worthless. You really have to spend time cleaning that data, and it's something that takes a lot of time. I honestly think that 80% of my time was spent cleaning data and only 20% was spent visualizing and analyzing it. So cleaning data is super, super, super important when you want to make data-driven decisions. Now, the second takeaway is that you need to build tools that help anyone on your team to understand data. When we started building things, it was just on my computer. It was very difficult for the rest of my team and the company at large to understand what was happening. When we really were able to grow was once we unlocked that and allowed their entire team or entire company to access that data and to experiment with it. It was very, very valuable. And even though it took a lot of effort, it was worth it. I think one important thing is that once you start building a data pipeline, it's not always obvious what the return will be. And it can take months, if not a year, to build a solid pipeline. It'll take a while for the results to come, but after a while, you'll realize that, hey, anybody on your team can query any data set that you have and come up with conclusions based on that. That's a really magical power. And when you have data that's sitting everywhere, it's not something you can do. So having all your data in a clean tool that has all your data available is super, super important. And lastly, I think the most useful insights that we found were novel and weird observations that we just found from looking at data. We spent countless hours experimenting and looking at data. And I think some of the most interesting things that we found were simply because we were trying things out. A great example of this is our delivery radius. When we first started delivering, we thought that, hey, why don't we just deliver to all of Berkeley? But we realized that it actually increased the delivery times for everyone because our robots would have to go really far and deliver that food to somebody who's like really far off of our core. We didn't really know how to interpret this, how to analyze this, how to visualize this until we started using tools like Kepler GL and Deck.gl. And these amazing tools allowed us to see that actually, when a delivery was far away from our center, it would take longer. And in addition, it would also delay our deliveries in the middle of our delivery area, in the center. So, thanks to these visualizations, we were able to make critical business decisions and shift our strategy in order to decrease delivery times, improve our customer satisfaction, and drive retention, which are all very important things. So that's how I made my first data driven decision. I hope this is going to be useful for you in your career building products and you're able to draw some takeaways that you can bring back to your team. Beyond what I mentioned, I think it's important to think holistically about data. When you generate data, maybe you should think about what data you're creating. Do you need to create it? Are you respecting users' privacy? How are you going to be using this data in the future? Is it aligning some North Star metric, or are you experimenting to optimize something? I think those are the kind of thoughts you should have going forward when you're building features, when you're developing products. When we started building Kiwibot, we had a notion of that, but we didn't really think through all the data collection we're going to do. So I think in the future, that would be an area for improvement. Overall, I'm really excited with the work we did at Kiwibot. When I arrived to San Francisco, I landed in the city on a couch at a friend's place. I had no idea what I was doing, and I got very, very lucky to meet an incredible team. Together, we did a lot of magic, and a lot of it came through the understanding of data. So I hope you're going to be able to do something similar. For me, what's next is to think about how to grow and how to build better products for more people. One thing that I recently started doing is to collaborate more effectively with engineers. When I was at Kiwibot, I used to micromanage engineers in a certain sense, and I got away with it a little bit. However, when I arrived at Google, I realized that that's not something you can do at all. And now I'm more in the framework of partnering with engineers. A lot of people ask, what got me into product management in the first place? For me, I started building things. I built my first business out of my bedroom when I was 13, fixing iPhones and iPads and all sorts of techie devices of my friends and teachers and classmates all over middle school. I got really, really lucky with it, and I stumbled onto a problem that resonated with a lot of folks. With that experience, I was able to start building better and bigger things. Shortly after starting to repair these phones, I built a food delivery platform. Together with my co founder, we took that platform from 0 to 200 orders a day in less than a month. It was the first time I really got to experience growth, and I learned a lot about the importance of having some notion of data. When we first started out, we were working with our restaurant partners by just like sending them texts with our orders. And that was okay, but totally not scalable. I quickly learned that restaurants wanted dashboards, and I spent a couple of months building those dashboards to help them grow with us. After my experiences at the food delivery platform that I built, I joined Nestle. And at Nestle, it was a very corporate environment, and a lot of data was available in silos. Some of it was in Excel sheets, some of it was in PowerPoints. And in my case, I was actually working with IoT sensor data. From that experience, I learned the power of Jupyter notebooks. With Jupyter notebooks, I was quickly able to analyze a lot of disparate data, a lot of different data sets, and bring them together to form a cohesive story. So, given that knowledge, I was able to come to Kiwibot and then say, like, hey, this is a really cool tool. We should use it to analyze our data. And then at Kiwibot, well, you heard the whole story. We went from having Excel sheets with our data for our North Star metrics all the way up to having a really sophisticated data platform that rivals major companies. Now at Google, what I'm learning about now is that it's more than just data. I'm learning that it's a lot in the way you communicate, it's a lot in the way you execute, and you have to have a lot of product sense. You have to have intuition in terms of when you should listen to data, whereas where you should listen to users. A big mistake we did at Kiwi was sometimes we didn't listen to our users, so we didn't pay enough attention. I think what I've come to realize during my time at Google is that it's important to consider the qualitative and the quantitative aspects of your data. That's a learning that I'm definitely going to take with me for the future. In terms of growth, I think everybody has room for growing, and me included. I definitely see myself growing. And in fact, I think I'm only 1% started on my journey to become a decent product manager. So I'd love to learn more about what you've learned and maybe some of the challenges that you faced. So feel free to reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, or send me an email, and I'd be happy to listen to you and learn more from your experiences. Maybe share some ideas. Thank you so much for joining this talk. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.